So when I talk about myself often and different instances or circumstances that I've been in and trying to use rational thinking and all that, and the dangers and the things that go wrong with it, almost always I end up coming back to like a base emotion or reaction to something that's based in fear. And I say it all the time that for me, usually I translate fear into anger, right? So what you actually see often for me is anger. So you would think it's that's the base of it. There's anger there. There's whatever it is, whatever's behind that. That's the base of it. But it's not. When I really dig in, I recognize more that it's fear that leads to anger. And I talk about that a bit. What I want to talk about a little bit today is kind of the flip side of that. The flip side of that being what I would call like mental toughness. And the more I think about it, I think the single most important trait to have if you're going to be open-minded, if you're going to be able to really self-reflect and overcome your biases and have the courage to challenge yourself and think differently and accept the fact you might be wrong and having humbleness to that. The main trait behind all of that is mental toughness. So you would think, or even I would have thought, recently, if somebody asked me that question, what's the most important trait? It would be like self-awareness. Self-awareness is the most important thing. The ability to see how you are, what you are, how you interact with others, what others are, what's happening in a situation. And don't get me wrong, I think that's unbelievably important. But I think mental toughness comes in higher because I would argue that if you have the awareness, well, for one, you may never get the awareness without the mental toughness. If you're not mentally tough enough to really be introspective and look at yourself and see and call out things you might be doing wrong or might not be handling properly, I don't know that you'll ever get that awareness. But further, let's say you have a degree of it enough to recognize it, to actually take action on it and do something meaningful and change takes a whole nother level of mental toughness. Because we've talked about these things before. A lot of the things that are embedded in you and drive your emotions and your feelings and your fear ultimately, and the way you act, they are so core to your identity. They're so core to who you believe you are as a person, and to challenge those things is terrifying, right? I always reference the example of the psychological experiment where they tested, they MRI'd somebody's brain when they were shown information that on a topic they felt really passionate about, but it was the other side, right? It was the other side of where they sit on the topic. And the reaction is the same as like seeing a bear in the woods, that fight or flight reaction. There's terror there. There really is. It's a terrifying thing. And that's what I would argue that mental toughness is so critical. If you can develop that, if you can get your mind to a place where you are strong enough, you are tough enough, you are gritty enough to kind of work through it, accept the fact that you're not perfect, accept the fact that there's ways in which you think which are unbelievably flawed that you can't even begin to recognize yet, accept that you can be so much better. That's the only chance you have, is to go through that. And again, I can't overstate enough how hard it really is. And it's both on the, I talk often about the two parts of the brain, kind of the autopilot piece and the longer term thinking piece. You can kind of think of this in a similar light. There's like macro level stuff and there's micro level stuff, in which fear and ultimately mental toughness become very important. It could be as simple as, I've given this example before, like I'm at the grocery store with my son and he accidentally or whatever is fooling around and knocks something over and a bunch of stuff falls. You could be pretty sure I'm probably going to get angry really quickly. It's going to be filled with anger. I might start yelling. I might get him in the car and start yelling. And at the root of that is just fear of embarrassment. It's fear of people looking at me and making a scene, and that people think I look stupid, and they, that I can't control my son, or that my son's a bad kid, or any number of things. That's really the base of it. And I know this now. I've had the ability to kind of reflect on it enough to see that's what's happening. It's a true fear of that reaction of what's the outside world going to say, and it instantly translates, into anger for me, and it drives the way I act. And for a long time, I didn't have the mental toughness to acknowledge that. I almost wore that as a badge of honor. And I could try and make the case that was a rational decision. Like I did a cost-benefit analysis, and I thought it was more beneficial to have that temper and to be passionate. But if I'm really being honest with myself now, I don't think I ever did a true cost-benefit analysis. I think I was too afraid of the answer. So I just went along assuming it must be a good thing, right? I'm not a bad person. I'm not a pussy, right? I'm none of those things. I'm not afraid of stuff like that. So it must be that it's a good thing that works that way. I just didn't have the mental toughness to really face that and get to the truth. And then again, it also works at the more macro level, right? Not the little things, but just fear in general, fear of being wrong, fear of your identity, of not being the person you thought you were, fear of things you don't fully understand, just fear in general at a very high level clouds a lot of our thinking. It clouds so much of what we do, and the mental toughness to overcome that at the big picture level, and to, again, be willing to be really reflective about yourself and think about ways you can improve. And you see it, right? You see it in people all the time that don't have that mental toughness, that aren't willing to push themselves. And you see all the different outs, right? Different things like arguing and screaming to kind of turn it into and have it devolve into something so they don't actually have to face, the issue. Hanging up the phone or turning off the TV or turning off the radio, whatever it is, right? I can't hear that because the fear is too great. If I hear that and it changes and it goes against what I think, that the fear is too much. So it's all those instances where I say mental toughness comes in. And it's funny, if you really started to catalog it, you could probably start to name, for me, it's anger. For other people, it's a whole host of other things. In my wife's case, it's usually like tears and sadness that she uses to try and deal with the fear, right? Everybody handles it different ways, but there's these common kind of second level reactions that you get that really start at a base of fear and ultimately a lack of mental toughness. So I've read a lot of books and doing a lot of things on mental toughness. David Goggins comes to mind. That's somebody who talks a lot about that topic. And I'm not sure that I've identified the right way. There's also the book, I'm going to slip my mind right now, but I think The Art of Learning, it's called, with the chess player and also does martial arts. It's a similar thing about how do you build that mental toughness in. And what I see consistently is the idea of it's a training that you go through, right? There's a concept of callousing the mind. So it's through repetition. Right? It doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't have to happen necessarily in the topic that you're afraid of, right? I don't have to go to the supermarket 5 times a week and have my son knock stuff over and just build a toughness around that experience. You can build that toughness in other ways that then you can apply in the other areas that you're actually trying to address. So for a lot of people like a David Goggins, that mental toughness is built through physical activity, convincing his brain that he's not going to give into it, right? If his brain tells him this is too hard, stop, he'll keep going, to convince his brain that, more or less he's in control. And I think you can then apply that to a situation where things start to go out of control and your brain's saying, get angry, you're scared, this is bad, you're embarrassing yourself, and you can control that and say, nope, just like you did on that run. So, I think I need to spend a little bit more time on thinking through those areas to continue to build the mental toughness, because I can use my anger example as the perfect one. And I'll probably dedicate a video to it at some point. I've spent a lot of time thinking about getting rid of my anger issues and my temper. And rationally, I can kind of understand it, right? I'm at that stage where I have enough mental toughness to be aware that it's a problem, but I still don't have the mental toughness to actually fix it yet. I'm striving for it. I'm trying to get there, but I can be honest with myself, I'm not there yet. I still give myself too many outs. I excuse myself that it's allowed and it's a good thing. And it's ultimately because I don't want to face the fact that probably somewhere deep down, like, I still am terrified of something, and I'm not as great of a person as I'd like to be at this point in my life. And, in terms of how I handle situations, because I remember being younger and telling myself often, literally telling myself the narrative, like, I handle stress really well. I do really well in those situations. And I probably cherry pick some examples where that made sense, but there wasn't real stress. And I truly tried to convince myself of that. It's only been over the last few years that I've started to acknowledge, like, I handle stress terribly. If I get overwhelmed, I crumble. And again, admitting that's the first step, but I don't have the toughness yet to actually fix it. Probably because somewhere deep down, I still believe, like, I'm okay. I could fix it. I'm not as bad as I think I am. And it's only once you acknowledge you are as bad as you think you are, which takes the mental courage and the mental toughness to do, that you can improve.